In our last video, we took a look at creating containers, rows, and then columns within those containers. Today, we want to look at going a little bit further by nesting containers within a column. You might think, well, wait a second. I thought it was containers, rows, columns. How can we then put a container inside of it? Well, it's easy. We can nest them. Nesting just means putting one group inside of another. Now, in order to do this, you should be using that container, row, column, and I'm going to show you a great way that we're going to do this. It does get a little bit messy, but it gives you a lot of flexibility with how you lay things out. So for example, let's say you had a sidebar and then you had a main content section like in a blog. Well, in that main content section, you might need to create 3 separate columns. Well, inside of that big column, you can put a container. Within that, you have a row and then have 3 columns. So you put columns within a column. Let's take a look at where you might use something like this. Here I have a div with a class container-fluid. So it's 100% of the width of my screen, no matter how big my screen is. That's going to be real important in just a second. I then have a row, and then I have a column, and this column is a col-md-2. So for medium size or larger, I take up 2 of my 12 column widths. Notice I have this labeled as left sidebar, and I also have a right sidebar on the bottom. In between there, I have a div class call. This is going to take up whatever my remaining space is for my XS or larger. Remember, XS is extra small. That's the default. If I want to use a different breakpoint size, I have to say dash and then that breakpoint size, whether it's small, medium, large, or extra, extra large. Now, within my call, I have another div with a class container. My container goes out to a maximum width size. Now, it's going to be pretty rare that I'm going to get past that maximum width size because I'm only using 2/3 the size of my screen. So it'd be kind of rare that I would take up the full size, but it's here just as a demonstration. So what am I going to do with this? Well, inside of that, I have 2 divs with class row. Inside of those, I each have my classes, and this is an example of what we've seen before. So I'm going to switch over to my browser real quick. And you see here, I have my left sidebar, my right sidebar, and then my center column has its own nesting. And it's completely different than the others. So I'm going to resize this real quick so you see what happens. Resize and resize. You notice how things are adjusting in size automatically for me. And I get to a certain point and poof. My left sidebar goes away. The content's not there. It doesn't even stack like my others did. But my right sidebar does. You might think, well, why is that? Well, I have some extra classes on my left and right sidebar. I want to show you the difference in them real quick. On my left sidebar, for the div that has that class, I have the call medium 2, but then I have D none. That says, don't display this ever. But then I override that and say D. The D is for display. If I'm a medium size, I want to display as a block, so make it visible. So this is using the visibility property of CSS to display none, inline, block, etc. So here I'm using none and block to decide if I'm going to show context based upon the size of my screen. If I get too small, I don't want to show my left side. Now my right side, I still want to keep. So how did I do that? Well, I came down here and said, you know what? I'm going to say SM none. SM being for small none. So I can only say for just one little piece, but it is going to be visible for the XS, the extra small. So it's kind of a weird case that you would do that. Normally you would either say none or all, but I'm just showing you that you can make some things disappear and then reappear at certain sizes. So my XS is displayed, my small is not, anything over my medium is. And so that's how I'm just using nesting to make things appear or disappear. So if I didn't want something to display in like a tablet size or on a phone size, I could go in and use some of these different sizing methods to modify it. Great example is maybe I have a small phone. I don't want to display it on the really small screens, only on bigger screens. I think, hey, a small screen, it's not going to be able to see this video we're seeing or see this image we're seeing. I can simply hide it for them. I'm only going to display it because you need a bigger screen to see it. So this is just some ways that I can go and do this. Now, typically, I'm not going to do this DSM none. I'm going to do, you know what? I want it to be just invisible if it gets a certain size. I come here and reload that. You notice it completely disappears. Now, this is a CSS property. That content is still there. So if you put content in there, it's going to load it. It's just going to be hidden. Why is that important? Well, if it's there, you have images or a video or whatever, it still has to go and load it. It's just hidden, so you're not going to make the loading of the screen any faster. You're just making the usability better for the end user. And that's what the nesting really allows you to do. Increases your flexibility for doing your layouts and makes hopefully the usability better for your end user. Next up, we're going to be looking at some Bootstrap components, first of which is going to be typography. So you're going to want to click on the link for that. We also have a whole playlist of videos on Bootstrap, so if you just found this one, you might want to check out the whole playlist.